Welcome to the program. My name is Matthew Leffler. This is Fleeting Conversations. I'm the armchair attorney. I'm so excited that you're here joining us today, whether you're watching this on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or catching it on the actual podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast or Amazon Music. I appreciate you. This has been a work of love, a labor of love, as it were. I love this business. I love this industry. And my deepest passion is helping people understand all the things that are going on in the world of supply chain from a legal perspective, but also from my own ridiculous perspective. And today I am so excited to have a very special guest, Timothy Dooner. He'll be here momentarily. Before that, though, we have to do a couple things, a little bit of housekeeping. And I'm going to have some slides because I know people always say, Matt, you talk really fast. I need to see some slides. And if you're on the podcast and you're listening to it, you're not going to see the slides, and that's okay. You can find them on the video version of this conversation. But let's get right to it. I love talking about mergers and acquisitions, and we have been talking about the Omni Logistics and Forward Air merger since August of 2023, nearly 7 or 8 months ago. And we had a general understanding. This is what was talked about. The idea was that Forward Air, a less than truckload provider, would be acquiring a 3PL, this company called Omni Logistics, which essentially is a freight forwarder. And it was going to make a great deal. And in August, it was announced. And in September and October, there was litigation in Tennessee. During the litigation, people from Forward Air said, we didn't get a vote. And I opined at the time, you don't get to get a vote. And consequently, that case was dismissed. But Forward Air said, no, thank you. We don't believe that we need to merge with Omni Logistics. And when that position was made very clear, Omni Logistics moved to the Delaware Court of Chancery, the Madison Square Garden of business disputes. And in that litigation, right before it was set to start, when Omni said we look for specific performance, they settled. The deal is going through. Much to the chagrin of some of the Forward Air shareholders, this deal was never not going to happen because when you're talking about business disputes, specific performance means not that you have a breakup fee. No, dear viewers, dear listeners. When you have a specific performance that's being required in a contract, the deal has to happen. And that's exactly what took place. Just like we saw so long ago when formerly Twitter, now X, Elon Musk said, I'm not going to buy Twitter for the amount that I said I was going to buy it for. And the board of directors from Twitter sued under the theory of specific performance. And that deal happened. So now you got a chance, hopefully over the last few months, to get a little bit more insight into the world of specific performance. Now, there's another thing we were talking about. I got a chance to join Dooner on this earlier in the week. It was the case of Project 44 versus Four Kites. This case, oh my goodness, this case, it just keeps giving. The idea behind all of it was someone from Four Kites decided to reach out to members of the board of directors and the chief revenue officer for Project 44. And what they said in those communications were essentially, it's a Ponzi scheme. It's like Theranos. It's a bunch of Chicago mafia folks. Here's the thing. When you say those, you create a thing called defamation. And if you actually impute things like criminal activity, it's defamation per se, which means you don't have to prove damages. Well, when Project 44 sued Four Kites for defamation per se in the state of Illinois, it was lost at the trial court level. They went to the appellate court, the intermediary court. And Project 44 again argued that this was a third-party communication. And this right here is on the screen, and I'll read it now for the folks that are listening, is the ruling from the appellate court, which I do believe will be the holding the Illinois Supreme Court will also follow. Quote, our law has long recognized that a corporation can have its own reputation and identity. And if that corporation or reputation is attacked, it may use defamation actions to defend itself. And because a company's reputation can be separate and distinct from those who run it, even at the executive level, we reject the idea that the corporation is the same as the agents who oversee it. since the allegedly defamatory messages targeted Project 44's reputation, not the reputation of the recipients. The defamatory messages were published to a third party, and they reversed the judgment of the lower court. This went to the Illinois Supreme Court. There was an oral argument. Both sides got to say their position, and ultimately, we don't know the outcome. But this case, the Project 44 versus Forkites, is likely the most interesting defamation case, especially in the corporate perspective, in the entire United States. I am telling you, I don't understand how someone like Forkites does something so absolutely ridiculous. Now, again, it's all alleged. This hasn't been proven. If it ultimately goes the way that I suspect, it goes back to the district court, the lowest court, the trial court, and they will then have a trial over what has been happening. Presumably, there might be an out-of-court settlement. Now, the final thing to show you today is the Fair Compensation for Truck Crash Victims Act. Oh, you have to love it when they use phrases like Truck Crash Victims Act. They titled the bills so that you feel a certain way about the things in front of you. I don't need to show you much about this, but let me break it down. In the United States, the minimum required insurance for a over-the-road trucking company was established in 1980. That number for drive goods is essentially $750,000. That was set in 1980. That's a lot of money. Let me be clear. $750,000 is, in fact, a decent amount of money. But you have to keep in mind that the cost of medical bills and the way that we have our medical system established, $750,000 doesn't take you very far. Maybe you can replace a hip, maybe you can replace a leg, or you can deal with the aftermath of this. But a catastrophic injury or a fatality, oh, it's a little bit more expensive than that. So what has happened for decades is people have tried to raise the minimum insurance requirements. It has happened multiple times, and it has never been successful. And when the owner-operators and the trucking, the ATA kind of agree, when OIDO and ATA are kind of aligned on something, chances are very, very high that you don't see a change. So even though the proposed rule, the proposed law, I should say, would change the amount to $5 million, which is, again, a lot of money, I feel it's highly unlikely to pass, given the constraints we have in the industry. But people ask me this all the time. They say, what do you think about raising the rates, the minimum insurance rates? It's an interesting topic. I generally fall in the camp that motor carriers should carry the insurance required to deal with the risk that they create. So I do like the idea of higher rates, but I am in the minority in many cases, as I am oftentimes. I have controversial opinions, but forget about me. I'm done talking about me. I want to talk to you about a guy who will be joining me in just a minute, Timothy Dooner. Now, if there was somebody who was the face of freight, somebody who you said, that is the guy who understands this business, for me, it's Timothy Dooner. And I absolutely love what he's been able to accomplish in his career. He has gone from the insides of the biggest of the big, FedEx, and has made himself what I call the face of freight. If I were to have a crystal ball, I would say maybe this year, maybe next year, there will be a time when Dooner is giving Freight the Nation, or Face the Freight of the Nation, or something to that effect, a state of freight from Dooner, because this man has done something that so few have ever achieved, which is to build a brand and a recognition by delivering incredible interviews and incredible content across so many platforms. He is an inspiration for so many people, myself included. And I am so grateful that he was able to make some time today to hop on. So without further ado, let me welcome the one and only Timothy Dooner.
Dooner! What's up? Matt, you're making me blush with that introduction. Thank you, sir.
Dude, I am such a huge fan of what you have done in this business. So thank you for making time. But for those of you who don't know who Dooner is, and I think there's maybe one or two maybe out there, who are you and what do you do?
Who am I? I'm a father of two. I got a 7 and 9-year-old boys. I got a lovely wife who's upstairs right now doing some design work, working from home. I'm down here in my studio, down here in Chattanooga. Lookouts represent. New stadium is a big issue out here, by the way. It was on the news, big controversy. And I am a content creator. I'm a podcaster, producer, host over at FreightWaves on sort of my front-facing role. And in my back-facing role, I'm a producer on sort of other shows, helping those come together and those ideas come together for our wide swath of brands we have over here in Freight Alley.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. So how in the world did you get started in the freight business? What got you into this business?
It was an accident. I didn't intend that. Like I tried to nothing against my parents. Like I wanted to be my own man. So I tried to distance myself. Like when I was 18, I moved off to college in Vermont and then I transferred to Cal Arts in California. I wanted to be a rock star. I worked in the music industry for a while, early 2000s, but that was also like the rise of piracy and Napster and everything. So not much money there. Had to get a real job. Wanted to move back to Boston. Ironically, my family and everyone had like moved out to SoCal at this point, but I had an opportunity to move back to Boston. I had this idea that I could get a job with, remember Guitar Hero? Remember that?
Yeah,
was, like,
of course,
big
absolutely.
in 2000. So this was circa 2005 and Harmonix was over in Cambridge. And I was like, oh, natural fit. I know music licensing. I know bands. I know how to sign bands and I know all that kind of stuff. So this would be right up my alley. Unfortunately, after like 3 months and no callbacks from them or anyone else on earth, my dad was like, dude, you're going to be 26 soon. You're going to be off my health insurance in a couple of months. You really got to find a job. Like, yeah, I hadn't really been to the point where I really needed to ask for money yet, but I was getting there. And I was like, well, do you know anybody? He goes, I know this guy, Bob Keneally, over at FedEx Trade Networks. FedEx Trade Networks was in Quincy, Massachusetts at the time. I was living in Dorchester. I had no car or anything. So I had to take the red line to the orange line, to the blue line, and then walk them out to work. But like I took this job, I thought it would maybe last, 6 months or something. I was doing entry writing for, I was on the global trade side of FedEx. So I was dealing with Reebok was my main account. I was dealing with footwear from them. So I had to classify shipments, deal with arrival notices, deal with dispatching, deal with clearing the items through customs, making sure all the duties were paid and that kind of stuff. And it was, I don't know, this business is a trap. Like I got stuck in it. And that's how I started out though.
When did you realize I will have asked this question. When did you realize that you couldn't get out of the business? Like what moment you're like, oh, this is where I'm going to be for the rest of my career?
For a while, what it was just like comfort. I understood the role. I got comfortable in like the role. It's what I did. It's how I made money. As long as I could afford rent and to drink. I've had problems with alcoholism. We can get into that later, but it was comfortable, right? And I could get in, I could do it. And when I switched from imports to duty drawback, which is my absolute favorite, if I've ever went back to operations, that's like one area that I would look in because it's awesome. Unlike every other seat in the house where you have people screaming at you, looking at for freight, in that you're putting together, like if you don't know what duty drawback is, basically if you bring something into the country and you send it back out or destroy it, you can get 99% of the duties paid back to you. This becomes a big factor with like audio manufacturers who bring stuff in here. They bring it back up to Canada and they don't go through NAFTA and they have duties. Or one of our biggest accounts was a luxury handbag maker. I won't name them. Okay. I'll spare them. I don't know if I have an NDA. They make very high-end handbags for women. You can probably guess. And what they would do every quarter is they would incinerate all the leftover handbags because they don't put them on the secondary market. You're not going to go in TJ Maxx and find these bags. So there's the duties are high. They were like leather and gold and stuff. So duties would be like, I don't know, 20, 25%, almost like footwear. So they would have, $500,000 to $1 million quarterly drawback claims. And you make that phone call to someone, they are never upset. They don't do any calculations whatsoever. You could be like, you're getting 30,000, you're getting $1 million. They don't care. They're like, oh, sweet. It's like Dooner calling, it's giving me money. I really like that. But the problem was, man, like a lot of these jobs people find themselves in, you always find yourself against a wall in the house. And with them, we were a satellite office of FedEx. FedEx is in Memphis. I'm in Boston. And the way a big corporation works is you're like duty drawback specialist 1. Raise is duty drawback specialist 2.
It's very, very, very straightforward. This is the patterns. This is the classifications.
Yeah. And you can't like in that role, what sucks is you can't go, they'll go, okay, you did awesome. You did amazing. You couldn't have done it better. You're getting a 3% raise this year.
That's right. There it is. There it is.
I live in Boston. 3% raise to me means get out of the house. You're not telling me to stay here. And I don't care. Don't tell me that everyone else only got 1%. I don't care. You only gave me 3%. I can't afford to live here.
If it can't match inflation, you're out of luck. I mean, this is the reality of it. Like that, I totally see that.
The erosion of value in positions. And I think that's why you see people jump so often these days. But it was such a fun job in a lot of ways, but I knew how to make money. So I jumped over to the sales side. Found that kind of traumatic. I don't like freight sales. I'm not interested in freight sales. And at least from the position of like, now I think I could do better. When I first came in, I was like a lot of young reps where it's like, I knew a little bit about the industry. And in some ways, knowing operations, I think held me back because maybe I'd be a little bit too logical in the sales approach where like I would get schooled by some of the guys who didn't know anything. They were just good naturally at talking to people. And if I leaned more into what I'm good at now, maybe better, but like really know no interest. But I got to a point in that it was like 2016, and I'm at this company called Ocean Air, and I really wanted to start a podcast for them. I was doing sales and I was having a hard time getting in the door places. And I was like, well, podcasting can be a great Trojan horse because now I can give value before I ask for value. I could go and say like, hey, I'm, Tim with X. I want to interview about how you're growing your business or whatever you're doing. And to me, that's like a great lead source. And maybe I could find that from the audience. But I remember the marketing director from there, he sat me down. He goes, hey, nobody listens to podcasts. Nobody's going to listen to a freight podcast. There's no market from this. They all sound terrible. They're all boring. And I'm like, that's execution by other people.
Exactly. You can do better.
So they did me a favor. They fired me when my wife was, no, it really was. It was such a blessing. They fired me in 2016. My wife was, we're about to give birth to our second son about 3 weeks away. And, it gave me an amazing opportunity to take care of an issue I had. I went to rehab to deal with alcoholism and depression.
Oh, man.
Always suffered with, still do. When you have clinical depression, you never really get rid of that. You just learn skills how to sort of combat that. And, but it gave me the opportunity to go to rehab, to be with my son when he was first born, and then start my other baby podcasting. And one of my therapists, when I was in a 6-day facility called McLean. It's actually where the movie the book Girl Interrupted, the movie as well, is based in. Okay. And dual diagnosis facility in Massachusetts. And I got put in the system, and I got to therapy, and I got to try different methods and all that stuff. And meanwhile, I'm building this show called The Shipping Pod in the back end because I had nothing else to do. I wanted to move to marketing. I was traumatized by sales, and I was like, the only way I can do this, being like in my early 30s, having not done this before, late 30s, 26, later 30s, having not done this before, is I got to make something. I got to prove some value. So that's where the Shipping Pod came in. I started out with a co-host. He bailed on me before the 10th episode. But that actually was fortunate too. You always take these doors, because then I was like, I need guests now. My first guest was my dad. My dad had he'd been the vice president of Roanoke Insurance in Boston and New York. He built that company. He built marine cargo insurance in the Northeast. He was really well known for that.
That's incredible.
So he was my first guest, and it was awesome. And then from there, then I got used to talking to guests. And then I started building it. This guy, Steve Aborn at Freight Plus, he heard the show. He was pretty close to where I lived, and he invited me in. I originally interviewed to do sales for them. Remember, I didn't want to do sales.
Yeah, no one wants to do sales, but then they end up doing sales.
Yeah, and he didn't hire me, but then he's like, he calls me 2 weeks later, and he's like, well, first started me doing some ghost blogging. My first year of podcasting, I think I made like $8,000. Thank God.
That's fantastic.
I know. That's the reason I stayed with it. I was like 8,000 now, but like maybe in the next year, because I didn't even know what I was doing. And it did. He turned the next year. He came to me and he goes, hey, we want to bring you on. You're going to build a podcast for us called Consulting Logistics. And, you're going to do marketing stuff for us and build a website and all that stuff. And then one day in 2018, the beginning of that, or 2019, I'm sorry, Craig Fuller, I do their newsletter, and I saw Craig Fuller was out promoting Freight Futures. And to me, as like an outsider, I think FreightWaves is maybe this big company or something. Yeah. And I don't know, everything seems kind of removed when you haven't touched it yet.
That's right.
But I reached out and I'm like, well, at the very least, he wants to promote these Freight Futures. So I'll see if he wants an interview. So he did. And funny story, he comes on the show, right? And at the time, Craig didn't have like a home studio. He would just call into stuff.
Oh, interesting.
This was troublesome for me as a podcaster because I had it set up that he would be coming on a VoIP link. And we'd be recording that way. So he doesn't do that. I don't have my system set up this way. And I'm like, oh, sorry, man, I can't do it. And something in my head, 30 seconds later, something in my head goes, no, you have to do it. And I was like, oh, you know what I could do? I could record. I could call him up in free conference call. I could record him from that. I could just take his audio and I can re-record myself, ask him all of these questions.
Sounds mind-boggling.
But I was like, I have to have this interview. I don't even know what was compelling me so hard to do it, other than like, it seemed like FreightWaves was kind of a natural, I love Freight Plus.
It was ascending. It was ascending at that point. I mean, this is the momentum was building behind that organization.
Yeah. And I felt like FreightWaves would really be my next opportunity. And fortunately, like a week later, Craig DMs me and goes, hey, I listened to the interview. I loved it. We're building a TV and podcasting network out here. You want to lay some bricks? If you want a job, come out to Chattanooga. And that was April 2019. And the rest is history.
That's amazing. Like there's a couple of threads I want to pull there. And I want to start off with just the idea of FedEx. So my dad was a roadway guy back in the 70s. He spent time at Airborne, and then a company called RPS came knocking on his door and they said, Greg, we want you to start a maintenance company because we're building a new system. It's going to be all vendors, all independent contractors, and we're going to outsource the garages. And he made a company called Outsource Fleet Services, and RPS, Roadway Package Systems, became FedEx Ground. So Ground was the very first customer he ever landed. He had it for his entire career. And he would drive from Chicago back to Sacramento every 2 weeks. And this gets into you. And I remember as a very young kid, I was like, I will never do that. I will never go into transportation. That is where you leave your family and you're gone forever. And I was like, I'm gonna be a lawyer. I'm gonna go do that. And I was defending trucking companies. I was a litigator for insurance defense. And when there's a catastrophic accident, that's the stuff I dealt with. And I began to have a problematic drinking problem. I remember vividly coming home from work, and 5 drinks was typical, just because like it sucked so bad. It was so hard. And I made a decision very similar, I think, to you, was like, we have to make a change. And I fundamentally believe there aren't any accidents. Like we are given the things we are given, and that's what's supposed to be. And then I've joined his company. I spent 6 years with him, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. But understanding when to say, I got to step back and do something different. How did your family approach that? Like how hard of an obstacle was that for you to overcome?
Well, my family was very sort of supportive. I mean, like, people around you, they sort of know you have a problem. I don't think people know how to like approach people with intervention. You have to want it. I've been to rehab twice. I went in 2009, but at that time I only thought if I went 90 days without drinking, like, I was fine. I don't really have a problem. Maybe it just was the depression. And what happens is you let your guard down and you realize you don't admit to yourself that you're an alcoholic, and then you allow yourself to get back into those things. So it ratcheted back up. And then in 2016 is when I really had to deal with it. Like I was drinking like 750 of Tito's a night, and some beers. Okay. It was bad. It was bad. I was drinking a lot. So it really had, and I wasn't even like getting any good feeling from it. I was like just feeling sick, but less coping like sick than hungover. Yeah. And it's kind of like my brain was so programmed into it. It's all I knew. But do you believe in like manifesting at all?
I do. Like you say what you want. And if you really believe and you commit yourself, I think that's how it works. Like I do believe that like we are given the sign of what we're supposed to do, and then you will it into the world. And if you don't have the will, it wasn't meant to be. But I do. Is that something you believe as well?
I don't believe it like the magical sort of, or like mythical, or like stones. What I believe in it is it's like mentality. However you reach that mentality is fine. If it takes stones or it takes prayer or it takes whatever, that's cool. But I think it's a mentality. You put yourself in the right place and you capitalize on opportunity. You stop saying the word no, especially on good things, and you start taking more good risks. Right? Like, you're already a risk taker. You're drinking yourself to death. You're like, that's a pretty big risk. You don't think you can take other risks? This is softball. Once I stopped drinking, it was like a superpower, Matt, because I was no longer hungover. And I was like, wait, world, I got all this energy now. I got like all this like power and enthusiasm. But like, I don't mean to make it sound like purple clouds. Like, it's like first year of sobriety sucked because all of the like self-medication that you're doing, you take that tool away from yourself and you can't do it. And you have to deal with everything in the like harsh light of day, and you have to deal with those coping skills. But it's very valuable. It's a very valuable thing to dig out. And unlike when I went in 2009, like, I admitted myself, there's a binary problem. That drinking has to stay on 0.
Yeah. It's like, I found like for myself, so my issue was sometimes situational depression, but generally it was anxiety. It was generalized anxiety disorder. If there's something to worry about, like, I'm going to worry about it. You could say, don't worry about it. But I'm like, oh, I've already thought about it. And I've been worrying about that for decades. And it was just getting away from those mental patterns. And what I kind of found over time was the destruction that we kind of crave is met, that it scratches the same itch as the creation aspect of things. So when you start creating things and putting things into the world, there is this feeling of positivity, even if no one watches, engages, or cares, just that aspect. Do you find that as a similar thing?
I think so. I mean, when you start changing, like the people around you can kind of see it too. And it's sort of like when you see people aren't changing, when people talk, there's talk versus action. And action is what, like, and I know this is such an obvious thing to say, but action is what makes things happen. A lot of people talk, but they don't do anything. I hate talking. Yeah. You know what controls my anxiety? Working and getting stuff done.
That's right.
That controls my anxiety. Like, I love it. Like, when I get home today, if like from after What the Truck, I get back here, it's like 1:15 to 2. I'm in there like getting the whole thing before I even know it. It's time to come on your show. I do this show an hour afterward. It's time to promote. That'll take 3 hours. I won't have to think about anything else other than making your show as successful as it needs to be. My show as successful as it needs to be. My guests look as good as possible. The stories look as good as possible. And like that's a good coping mechanism for me.
Well, and let me back up there. Let's build on the thing about but what you do. Like, did you have any idea when you joined FreightWaves that you would become part of the zeitgeist of transportation? Was that in your mind, or was that something aspirational?
Well, so when I was at Freight Plus, I would say no, because they were called A-Born Company at the time, and I knew it was just a product to content market a company, and which was fine. Like, this is cool. This is much better than what I was doing before. This is in line. I'm learning a lot of great skills. But I knew that when I had the opportunity to go to FreightWaves, I knew they were coming up higher on Google, and distribution is everything in this space. So I knew that if I had the opportunity to go there and honestly, like, put my blood, my handprints, my DNA on the very, very, very start of FreightWaves TV and the podcasting side, I could make waves. Like, when I first came in there, like, Craig wasn't even sure. He was like, this guy's crazy. I don't think anyone likes this stuff. We're trying to be like Bloomberg. But something funny happened. The analytics started going up and up, especially of what the truck was before I got there. It was like sort of very static, very flat. There wasn't a huge amount of strategy. And I came in and I was just like, I'm like, this is part of my sobriety and this is saving my life. And I got to pour everything into it. But also it's like, dude, I know I have an amazing opportunity here. And you know what? A lot of times, FreightWaves is a very interesting place. Startups are a lot like this. People come in and they want like very defined roles and what to be told what to do all the time. And that's very frustrating to like builders and startups. That's because it's like, look, we came in here, nobody said anything. And it was like, I just want you to go do this, figure out how to do this, which to some people is incredibly freeing. Like, to me, it was so free. And it was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and want the truck. And we're going to put a camera in the booth. And now it's not just going to be an audio podcast, it's going to be a video podcast. And social media is really taking off, especially freight social media. So we need to clip this thing up because attention spans are short. It's an hour-long show. If I can get brand awareness through a 60-second clip on TikTok versus someone listening to an hour, that's perfectly fine. Because nowadays, especially when you sell this stuff, you're all looking at it in aggregate. And these were all just big acceleration points that we were able to put in. And it was nice because it was like nobody had plowed this field. So I was able to take a lot of the stuff that I knew from watching other types of media. Like, I'm an avid podcast listener. And I was like, the biggest problem with freight podcasts is they don't sound like a podcast. It sounds like a webinar with strict audio. This is so obviously sponsored content. Nobody can listen to it for more than 5 minutes. Like, you got to make something that engages people a little bit more, has a little bit of speed and a little bit of pace to it. And like if you look at like FreightWaves, very minimalism, very blue and white. And I came in and I'm like maximalism on I changed the logo to like the over the top style, like what the truck here.
I love
it's even on pillows now. But I would like, they were blue, so I was like, it's red, and that was like, that's like stolen from wrestling, like SmackDown versus Raw.
Yeah,
like,
dude, absolutely.
I'm like, I want to be a little bit counterculture to FreightWaves because my voice is different, and also as almost like a little bit of a firewall because at the time FreightWaves was very, very noisy. I mean, newsy, not very opinionated. Where what the truck brought a lot of opinion in. And sometimes people aren't able to parse that as easily, or they go, well, your article said this, but then this person said this, and it's like, yeah, that's his opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the news article. So audience training and stuff too. But yeah, man, I mean, yes.
Well, the thing is, like, you saw the trends and forces that were like impacting the audience. Like, this attention culture, how can you get someone to pay attention to anything? It's just about impossible. And we also realized, to your other point, like, if you sound like an infomercial, people are going to say, oh, this is an infomercial. You're selling to me. I don't want to be sold to. And you bring this authenticity that is unlike anything else. And it just blows me away that you were able to find that moment to be that guy in that room and take it to where we are today. And I want to go back to one of the first things you said when you introduced yourself about being a father of two.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a father? Like, what does that mean for you?
Greatest life-changing moment of my life. It unlocks so much empathy inside of you. I don't think I'd be complete as a man without my kids. It's the kind of thing, like, I knew I always sort of wanted kids, right? But I always wanted to, like, find like the right woman and the right family. Unfortunately, like I found my wife, and it all made sense. And, we waited a couple of years, we had the kids, and it's been absolutely fantastic. But like, they're my best friends. Like, it's been life-changing. And it's so, like, you talk about depression, you know what really cures depression? Like, you can have a bad day. You can, someone can quit on you. A friend can say something that, now you're not friends anymore. But I come home, and those kids are sitting here and they want to build some Legos, or they want to play some PS5, or they want to play some Switch. And it's just like, It's just heaven. Kids are awesome. Baseball in spring and fall, being out in the field with them. I mean, know what I have anxiety now? One of them turned 9. And I'm like, geez, he's halfway to 18 already. Like they're growing too quick.
Man, I feel I'm 100% aligned with you. I feel like I was put on this earth to be a father. And my kids now, I have Michael, who's 10. I know he's 11. He just turned 11. Michael's 11 now on January 2nd. Rowan is now 8. My twins are now 14 months, Elisa and Elijah. And it's so amazing. And I look at my son, and I like my oldest son, Michael. I started making content because of him. Like, he has dyslexia, he has ADHD, he struggles mightily in school. He's done amazing recently, but he had some hard times. And making content was one of the greatest joys that we had together. And I remember, I don't know if you follow Dan the Driver Row. I suspect that you do. Dan's amazing. I would make these videos, and then Michael would say, Dad, let's put a pumpkin in the background.
I'm also a dog
somewhere.
father.
Yeah, my dog is around here somewhere. She's peacefully napping. But
hi, Randy.
Dan would call out where the pumpkin was and the comment. And my son would come home from school, no matter how hard his day was, his eyes would light up. And he'd say, oh, did they see the pumpkin? I'm like, yeah, buddy. Yeah, of course they did. And to your same point, like, I love playing Roblox with my kids if I'm traveling, or playing Balloons TD Battle. I'm not the PlayStation guy. I'll play Xbox with my wife. We play Diablo 4. But it is the greatest gift in the world. And do you see them following in your footsteps? Do they see you wanting to be creators as well?
You know what's so fun about being a father is it also you get to sort of teach and work on some of you can leave that open. I don't care if they jump in here. Sorry, my production team in the background. It's my wife and 2 dogs. She's about to take it for a walk. Have a safe walk.
Spectacular.
By the way, like, we are back in Chattanooga. It was like 7 degrees last week. It's 66 degrees out today. It is so good. Perfect. But like, what I love about it is, like, so like my kids, I taught them how to use a computer via podcasting. I was podcasting when they were super young, and I started out on my kitchen table with a cheap $15 mic from Amazon and using Audacity. And like, that is how they learned how like file trees work. That's how they learned how like editing works. And like, I started them when they were 4 on like the computer doing that. And I got them in like, I one thing I hate, like, let's talk parenting for a second. I hate when people put up like these barriers, like Lego puts 18 plus on a box, or someone says it's for kids 7. Like, if your kid has an aptitude for anything or they're interested, I double down on it. Like, when my kids were into Star Wars, I'm like, this is how I'm going to teach them vehicle schematics, and how I'm going to teach them about planets, and how I'm going to teach them about the solar system, because they love space already. And I'm going to teach them about politics as well, through the Empire and the Rebels and the framing of this, because they'll even say stuff that complicates them. They'll be like, Dad, I love Anakin, but he's the bad guy. And I was like, well, the story is being told from one perspective, and you have to understand that there's always a good guy and a bad guy. But that good guy, he thinks the other guy's bad. The bad guy, he thinks that other guy's the bad guy. And Star Wars.
Are you a Vader apologist now, Dooner? Is that what we're getting into? Emperor?
Anakin was redeemed at the end of Return of the
Jedi. That's true. He did. He was a good guy. Maybe blow up a couple planets here and there, but that's okay. But I think you're exactly right to be able to take what is in popular culture and teach hard things. This is one of the great joys of being a father, is teaching them values. And we don't want the values to be taught by the culture necessarily. We want to have some level of control. Have you found like the ability for these kids to access YouTube Shorts or TikToks? Like, is that a challenge you're wrestling with, or how have you dealt with that?
No, so like, they use YouTube. They don't really use. They're 7 and 9. They don't really use TikTok, or if they see a TikTok, it's on what they watch my show. So it's on. It's one of the reasons I beep all the swearing on there. The other is so offices don't shut it off.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's the other reason. But a lot of people, including my kids, watch the show. And wait, well, I'm sorry, I lost the question for a second.
Oh, how do you help your kids manage the technologies?
So they watch like Mark Rober and stuff on YouTube.
Yeah,
they love that kind of stuff. He loves they love anything that's sort of like how things work, like how things like in society function and work. And then on like Netflix, they mostly watch like nature shows. Oh, and they love like toy reviews. Like, this is when we were kids, like, if you wanted a video game, you'd have to go and rent it. Now you can watch someone do an entire playthrough and make mods and content, and that's what they're getting into now, is modding. So they're using like they just started Minecraft modding. So they're learning how that works. And Lego's been a big help, because they're making bitmaps on there. And I'm like, this is just like your Legos. You know how this Lego map you're making, you got to put down each one, and it looks small. It all starts with one little white brick. But you put enough white and red and green and blue bricks down, and you put in the right pattern, it's going to look exactly like what you want it to look like. And that's how they're learning. Like, it's the same concept. Yeah. So I trick them into assembling thousands and thousands of bricks you know what? Some people are like, Legos cost a lot of money, but I'm like, for less than like $5,000, I've got them to assemble millions and millions of bricks, understand
Yeah.
architecture, learn about all these things. You'd pay that on a course, would you? But now we get to keep some dope ass Legos.
Like my son my oldest son stumbled upon Ants Canada, and it's this YouTube channel where a guy is making like colonies of ants in his house. And like my wife is like, we'll never do that. I'm like, I understand, Holly, we're not going to have ants in the house, but it is fun to watch like these ecosystems and as they learn these things. And that's where I kind of find myself going, okay, I want to be careful of screen time. I want to be cognizant of what they see and how long they watch it. But there are so many great creators out there. You can learn so many things. And one of the things I want to do is talk about things that I've learned and talk about things that you've learned, because you are on the tip of the spear with so many things. So I want to start off with, who is Gord? What is this? What is this about? What's happening? What is this thing?
So if you're not on Twitter, you probably would not know what we're talking about. But there's a truck driver. Well, he's a former truck driver now. He's a writer now, but he just got out of the truck. He was pulling logs up in Canada. He used to run road trains up in Australia. He writes for Newsweek. He's been interviewed by like Rachel Premack a bunch of times, been in her article. So his name is out there. So he was just on Tucker Carlson's show, who moved over to X.
That's right.
Giant following over there. So a lot of people see him on there. And some people don't know who he is. He's probably, like, this is no offense to Gore, but he's probably the least well-known or recognized guest that Tucker has probably had.
Sure.
There's a conspiracy theorist or two on Twitter who are like, oh, he's like a supply chain crisis actor or some kind of industry plant that Tucker just brought on to like stoke the fires of what happened with the Freedom Convoy in Canada. But it's been very funny to the FreightX community, because we are a big community. We all met at F3. We all talk and see each other's tweets every day. And, you know, we'll jump in if there's a battle or it makes sense to meme and like make fun of something.
Absolutely.
And she thinks that it's all bots and like we're all there's video of us talking and dissing her. And I don't know, he was on What the Truck today. And we addressed the controversy.
So
if he's real,
a real person as far as we can tell at this moment.
Look, here's how I deal with trolling, though. Here's my advice to all of you. Never emotionally troll. Only troll if it'll A, look good to your audience, and B, make good content. That is the only way. If I'm arguing with you, realize I'm turning you into content, because if it's just something that's making me emotional or annoyed, your ass is just probably going to get muted or blocked. Like, I'm not, like, if it's just like you know, where you're going nowhere. Yeah. And most arguments you go nowhere with, but if it's nowhere, I can turn to content. I'm a producer. This is the only thing I think about is content. If I can turn you into content, I will. If I can't, you're blocked. And that's how everyone should deal with trolling, because it's a waste of time otherwise. And in general, I don't like to fight too much, because I think it looks bad. And I think it makes people like look bad. There's a guy on LinkedIn. I'm not going to name him, but he loves to like call out and name. He's like super toxic. He loves to call out and name companies all the time. And he has these big dumb ideas. He called out one factoring company. He called out their founder. And his founder responds on LinkedIn and he's like, dude, we got back to you on this. And like, you think we can take this offline? Like, this is a small industry. Don't piss in the pool unless like it's a pool you want to piss in. Like, just realize you might have to go back in it.
Okay. That makes sense. I have not interacted myself with Gord, but he seems like an interesting person. Now, the other person I want to talk about is, who is Reed? I have his hat. It says, please advise. You have had him on the program a few times. He spoke at F3. What is that all about?
Your guess is as good as mine. I mean, like, he is like some Arizona guy, but he's kind of from nowhere. He's lived a bunch of places. He doesn't really have like he has more of an affect and a vibe than like an accent. So you can't really place where he's from. But what happened is he was at Matt's last year and he wore a hat, like a please advise hat, but it was just like a Post-it. Like it was just like taped to his hat. And people just thought it was funny. So he decided to make some hats. Now he sold like, 1,000 or so hats.
That's
I'm not sure it's the exact number, but like in our space, a pretty decent number of hats, but he's got it on the right people's heads. And he's like, you know what Reed is? Reed's a good connector. Like he's got a Discord. He knows and brings a lot of people together. And that's kind of what he's been doing. I think he also has like a capacity load. I don't book freight at the moment, so it's not something like I work or interact with. I don't really even use Discord. Discord to me is like a Slack for a company I don't work at.
I've been on the Discord a couple of times, but I don't have the time. I just don't have the time to go look at things. So I'll follow things on X. I still want to call it Twitter. I don't call it the Willis Tower. It's a Sears Tower. Like I'm a 38-year-old
Boston Garden.
I don't
change. Not like TD Bank, North Garden.
I don't change names. Like it's there. It's in my head. One of the things I want to talk to you about, and my dog is beginning to whimper, so I apologize in advance. If my wife, if you're watching, I think you're supposed to be. She said she would. Get the dog. Anyway, one of the most popular episodes of What the Truck came last year talking about yellow.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most interesting and chaotic moments I'd ever had. Yeah,
that one.
I was on that one, and we had a chance to listen into the hearing right beforehand. And like I remember so vividly, before we hopped on that call, the lawyer for Yellow said, "Your Honor." And for the pilots who are watching, let me just back up for a second. Yellow had missed a $50 million payment to the Central States Fund, which was going to cause 11,000 families to lose health insurance on the following Monday. And the Teamsters said, if you don't pay it, we're striking on Monday. And what Yellow had done was they went into court and said, Your Honor, like they're basically trying to get an injunction to prevent the Teamsters from striking. This is a company that was founded in 1924, a 99-year-old company because they went bankrupt later on. But in this moment, the lawyer for Yellow, which is one of the oldest and biggest trucking companies that had ever existed, says if they strike on Monday, we're bankrupt on Friday.
Yeah.
Never heard a lawyer in open court say something like that in my entire life. And I was blown away. But put yourself back in that moment. What were you thinking as you put that show together, understanding that something truly historic was happening right in front of us?
Well, in June, all that yellow talk started before they went under, a month or two before they went under, that talk already started happening. And we were at our event in Cleveland, and there was a number of carrier execs over there, one who actually put me on the phone with somebody else. And I was talking to all of them, and I'm like, what's up? What do you guys think on yellow? And they're like, they're on a death spiral. We've already pulled our freight. Everyone's pulling their freight. Everyone knows to pull their freight. The headlines are out about it. It's unsalvageable. So we already knew the big dogs were pulling out. So the outcome of them going bankrupt seemed almost like a foregone conclusion, but so many people were impacted by this. Like we were talking to the drivers who were impacted. We were talking to the ones who wanted to strike, who didn't want to strike. We were getting all that perspective in the week leading up to sort of that trial. By the way, a little advice: if you ever call into a trial, your phone is live. You're like, the mic is live, so you got to mute yourself. And they might kick everyone off the phone call if they hear like someone's chatter in the back, like, oh, we got to get this clip for the show. Dude, they might just end the entire thing. So my advice is hit mute if you join a court case. I'm sure, I don't know who would ever do something like that. I'm just saying it could happen. It's in the realm of possibility. But it was such a big story, and we wanted to bring the law side from you. We wanted to bring sort of the carrier side, and I think we had a shipper perspective on, and then we had Zach with like sort of our sonar and freight data and sort of talking about what was going on in LTL. And it was such a challenging topic. I mean, last year, there was a couple of challenging. There was Convoy and that one that impacted a lot of people, two massive failures, one freight tech, one in trucking. And that story was like for me as a producer, like I don't try to know everything. I try to be the audience that doesn't know everything. And my goal is to position the topics so my experts can fill in those sort of details and give their perspective. If you notice on my show, people say it's like bipolar. They'll be like, at the beginning of the show, you just talked up autonomous trucks. At the end of the show, you have a guest on destroying autonomous trucks. And it's like, yeah, these are different people's opinions. I want to reflect the different opinions that people have in this space. The reason I started What the Truck is because every other like sort of show, article, especially at the time, was so spontane. And if it covered something, it was like paid for by the company that was doing it. And all you would hear is one perspective. But there's way more perspectives. I take polls all the time. I know my audience very well. I know that they're very diverse in thinking and in position. So if it seems bipolar, that's just because we all have different perspectives.
That's right. I mean, it's not a monolith. That's a critical thing people need to understand. The supply chain is fragmented and is lots of things. What I find so admirable about what you do is that combination of educational and entertaining. It's this thing where you get these great pieces of information. And again, I go back to talking about yellow because this is something that like people go, oh, I'm ex Uber, I'm ex Amazon, I'm ex Google. We don't hear people go, oh, I'm ex Roadway, I'm ex Yellow, I'm ex CF. And it's a different world, but the best operators in this country in the transportation space cut their teeth almost to every one of them at Roadway, Yellow, or CF. And it was one of those moments you found and you captured and you did something that no one else did. And that was incredibly impressive. And I look back now and the story of Yellow will be told by the content you put together on that day.
Oh yeah, it was like a sad story, crazy story. I mean, this people used to say, like Craig Fuller quotes when he was starting up FreightWaves, people would say like, how are you going to make like a supply chain news site? This business is really boring. And maybe it used to seem that way because it was very slow moving and it was just press releases that got published.
Yeah.
But the real world of freight is chaotic. It's dramatic. There's theft. There's every crime imaginable
There's wage
happening.
theft. Like, you're right. I mean, this is like, to Bill at that point. I remember coming on the show and we talked about TQL misclassifying 4,500 freight brokers, and you get to see everything in this business. Everything comes on a truck, and that's what you've tapped into. Is your audience needs more of this stuff because it is the most fascinating industry on the planet, as far as I can tell.
I always thought, like, too, like in terms of like designing the show, like it used to be very hard for me to know exactly what was going on because it wasn't aggregated well. There'd be like this story, you got to Google supply chain, you got to go over here, and maybe this person tweeted that, and maybe that person wrote that post on LinkedIn. And so my idea always was like, I'll aggregate all of the news and make these stories come to life with people, while like keeping it fast moving. Because me too, like I like things to be tangible. I like things I can see and touch, and freight is very visual and you can see it and touch. But like working on like the customs broker side, it's kind of intangible. It's kind of abstract because you just have documents. You don't actually see the footwear you're classifying. You just see like leathers, like, you know, rubber sole, leather inseam. And that's what you see. And there's so much to this world. And there's so much to these people. And I think that's also been the secret sauce, is just having a number of guests on every episode to give a lot of people who were anonymous and never had an ability, very brilliant people who never had the ability to really speak unless like maybe at a conference. And if you go to conferences, if you're not like the opening keynote in the morning, like go into some of those rooms in like the middle of the day when everyone's already shuffled to the floor, you know, maybe you're hitting 150 people, maybe. I don't like, because everyone else is like up and around. If you don't have that keynote spot.
I look at what you do, and you are like a source of amplification. Like you are unto yourself a platform, and you bring so much value to the people who have an opportunity to talk to you about whatever they're passionate about, whatever the topic might be. And I find that to be so encouraging. But I want to transition briefly to, how does it feel like to have people send you pictures of the strap work of transportation? Like, because I got to imagine, like, every day you were being tagged all across the internet with whatever people see about the strap work or something. How did that start, and how do you maintain all those amazing pictures?
I mean, it started out as sheer laziness. There was just like one day I had a picture of strap work on a vehicle, like bad strap work, and I could not think of a caption that was funny, like at all. Like for the life of me, I'm writing like, and if it takes me more than 5 seconds to write a tweet, I'm just going to delete it anyway. I'm like, that's too much work. I got ADHD. I could be working on something else. This is a waste of time. So I was just like, whatever, rate the strap work. Maybe like, I'll just put engagement bait on it. Rate the strap work. And made a couple people comment. What happened was that initial one got like 250 likes on LinkedIn and a ton of comments. And so I'm not an idiot. And I'm like, okay, rate strap work is a thing now. They call it a viral loop, which is, and it wasn't a viral loop yet, but it was like,
I have to write this term. I never heard it.
And like everything that I sort of do when I'm producing Want the Truck, it's all based on like trial and error. If something fails, I stop doing it. If something works well, then I just continue to do it. So I just would find more and more pictures. And then like after a couple of weeks, like you mentioned, I didn't even have to look for pictures anymore. People were just sending to me every day or just doing their own posts where they were tagging me. And then like people comment all the time. They're like, I can't drive down the highway anymore without looking at the strap work on a truck. Thank you, Dooner.
Okay, so you've said an interesting word with experimentation, and I fundamentally believe in experimentation. What I have found for myself, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is that like there's never enough. Like I experiment, I find something that works, I like it, I do something different, I keep going. I'm never satiated. Do you find yourself satiated? Is that a thing you can have as a content creator?
No, the one thing I like about my depression as a superpower is I'm never, ever able to be happy. So I'm always sort of a little dissatisfied with how the show is doing. I'm always thinking that like, we're going to go bankrupt or I'm going to get fired or this wasn't good enough or this isn't going, like, that's the only anxiety I feel. And the way I fight that anxiety is by going to work and going on to the next thing.
I see. Yeah, it's that treadmill. For me, it's kind of the same thing. I love everything that I'm doing, but I'm never quite like, that's it. That's the goal. The goal is always moving. It's this constant hunger for the next thing. And it's insatiable, but it is useful. It's incredibly useful.
You're not listening to the audience if your show is the exact same format and thing that it has been like 2 years ago. Like you have to constantly be listening to people and modifying what you do to make sense to the audience. Like I can make a show for me, that's fine, but like that would just be Dooner in his bedroom. I got to make a show for like you, the audience. So what's most important is what the audience values, what the guests value, what the sponsors value. And obviously a lot of it is my personality that's imbued into the show. And I mean, I booked the show, so it's my perspective on who I bring on. I mean, I make that decision. I make the decision on what stories to cover, but the decision is based upon the data analytics I know about the audience and what I think that they want to hear.
Well, let me ask you this, kind of getting more like just forward looking. Are you feeling excited about where our industry is moving? Just to kind of give a little bit more of my thinking of this question. Like you go back to pre-deregulation, that was the time in the industry that I have at least a very small tangible relationship with. But 60% of truck drivers were unionized in 1980. Compensation was a different thing altogether. There wasn't a real breakdown of truckload or less than truckload. It was just trucking, and it was the handful of unionized motor carriers. Fast forward to today, and we see the explosion of motor carriers, the explosion of brokers. We see autonomous stuff kind of knocking on the door. How do you feel about freight in the next couple of years, couple decades? Like, can we even think about that this time?
It's tough, right? I mean, especially like since 2020, it seemed like it was a little bit more static in previous decades. And now we've just been on like, it seems like the universe is trying trial and error too. It's like, let's throw every unhinged idea at the wall all over like the world. And there's so much going on. And like, to me, I don't see freight as just freight. Freight's like a part of the world. It's a part of the economy. It's a part of politics. I mean, it's the lifeblood of the economy. It's part of everything. And it's weird. Like this year feels so like inflection-y. Like there's I think people don't really realize where the middle's head is at. And I think the middle is very sick of like any idea that a certain party doesn't like being shot down as either like far left or far right. And it's like, no, I think both of you have encroached on a lot of centrist and middle ideas. And if you really want to sort of like win and move forward, you have to also be speaking to that audience. Like, absolutely. Of course, like Dems always going to hate you. Of course, Republicans are. But it's weird. Like you got the situation over in Texas, right? You got the situation in Yemen. You got the ports. And like, I don't know if I can predict how the freight industry is going to go, but I really can predict that I'd love to be able to tell the story of it. And I want to be here to tell the story of it. I'm sure a lot like you. It's like how you think as a lawyer. It's like, it doesn't matter like what the future, it matters what this case is, and it matters how this unfolds. And some of this stuff needs to be compartmentalized. But I'm mostly excited. I like tech, but I think like a lot of people, there's also this big fear, especially like the rise of AI, as janky as some of it may be, as janky as some EV trucks may be, as janky as all these solutions may be. Obviously, there's a lot of money and there's a lot of thought being poured into it. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this industry transforms. We tend to move a little slower than everyone else. So I think we might see society a little bit before we see something as complicated as trucking change that. Like we're the front runners in the economy and maybe like the back runners in culture. Like, would that kind of be fair?
I think you're right. I mean, you look at trucking, it is one of the most common jobs in the United States is driving a commercial vehicle. It is, and I go back to think of this, the Amazon effect, which is in my mind, as I think about supply chain, is the product and how it gets to you is the same experience. So you've married this transportation with the experience of the product, and that made supply chain seem more interesting. And to your other point, like the way we marketed this industry before was you get your truck, maybe it's a PACK car, like Peterbilt, Kenworth, get a Volvo or something like a Caterpillar when they used to make over the road trucks, get that picture with a thumbs up, and then you're like, we're done. Perfect. And it's evolved so quickly. And again, I go back to you because you have been the one of the first movers in my mind as to how to talk to a younger generation that this industry needs you. We need people to say, I can be a material handler. I can drive a yard truck. I can drive a commercial vehicle across state lines. And it's because of the kind of mentality that you've built and the culture you've kind of surrounded yourself with that I think speaks to a younger generation in this ridiculous business. And I just hope when they do come on board, they're not misclassified as non-exempt for the purposes of overtime. For my friends at TQL, again, I want to just emphasize, please let me follow you. I'd love to follow you if you're watching.
Yeah. Well, they're blocked. They're locked out on Twitter. Like if you're not like in their network, you can't join them. But you said an interesting thing there, and like the way I saw it, like the biggest opportunity and the biggest flaw I saw in freight marketing was that companies would market to companies.
Yeah.
They're like, it's B2B. We're marketing. Companies don't buy anything. A logo's not going to buy anything from you. People buy things.
That's
you
right.
have to network with these people. You have to understand the companies, and you have to reach the people that they want to reach. So I think the biggest sort of game changer, and then a lot of people sort of adopt now, not just sort of like the look and the memes and stuff, is like just the concept that like we have to market to the community versus marketing towards like a company logo.
And you have to be an industry participant. Like you can't just be, I do this one thing and that's the only thing I'm ever going to talk about. Like there is value in communicating, to your point, like people to people. And what are your values as an individual, as a company, and finding new ways to do the same thing. We all want you to buy or something, like whether it's insurance or trucks or freight or technology, whatever, but it's about being, accessible and entertaining. And you do such a great job, like working with your audience. Now we're getting close on the time. So I would like to kind of pivot to the last part of this conversation. What advice would you give to somebody who wants to start creating? Like, what is the advice you give to somebody? Start somewhere, but like figure out an idea and an angle, but don't overthink it. Like when I started the shipping pod, when I took over What the Truck, I had no idea what it would look like in 2024. No idea. It didn't matter. All I cared about was what it would look like the next episode. And that's the way I think when you're creating content. You start your newsletter. Don't fall in love with your ideas. Don't fall in love with yourself. Fall in love with your audience and see what is working. Look at the analytics, see what people are clicking on, see what's resonating, and go from there. I got to tell you, it's not like, I would say one of the rarer things about what I've been able to accomplish is to be paid as a full-time podcaster. That's amazing. That's amazing. Very few people can do that. They can do it as an enhancement. They can do it as content marketing for their company. I would say don't make the goal to be paid as a full-time content creator to begin with, but start making content. Like start in a safe area. Start with your company or around the industry you work in, you understand and love. Stop chasing the cat, Randy. I love your dog. It makes me so happy.
Cats and dogs. He's going wild. He's going wild trying to corner my cat. But like, have a cat, have a dog, become a father. That will help you out. Or produce some content for your kids. But no, I mean, like, just start. Don't, like, in the beginning too, people get embarrassed. They go, oh, I put a post up, it only got 3 likes, it only got 10 likes. Right. You just started, and that's okay. Don't be embarrassed because it only got 3 likes. Nobody saw it. So who's going to see it to be embarrassed in the first place? That's right. I don't even kill it. I can do posts that have 500 likes, and I have some that have 3. I put up one today that has 3. It doesn't matter.
It's the internet has a very short memory. Like no one's going to judge you harsher than you're going to judge yourself. That's how I've kind of viewed it. And I continue to experiment. And I look at what you've accomplished so far as just kind of the beginning of where I see your career going. What are you most excited about for 2024?
To make What the Truck the biggest show possible, obviously, like just always that's my baby. That's what I love doing. But I also have an opportunity within FreightWaves in our company to take on a more creative direction this year with some of the new products that we're making. So I don't have to like do the show and host the show, but I'd really love to help some new creators within some of our brands that have never done anything before or have done it and maybe it hasn't worked and they need another approach. And I didn't have necessarily that direction beforehand, and coming to this year, I do, and I'm able to take on some of that ownership, and that's what really has me excited. Because there's a lot of times like I've watched other stuff and I've been like, ooh, I think this would make it great, and that would make it great, but like my job was to focus on What the Truck, which it still is.
What are the games that you play with your kids? Like, what's your favorite game to do these days?
So we just got Sonic Superstars. That's really, really good. You can do 4-player. My 7-year-old really got into Monopoly. And he is very hard to defeat. He is incredible. Like for some reason, he like kills my mom, me, and his older brother. He's like the Donald Trump of like Monopoly or something. He's just crazy. He just bankrupts all of us. He's got properties everywhere. He takes over. His favorite are the orange ones. He takes over New York, Tennessee, and the other one in there. They love that. We like to play some like Smash Brothers, some All-Star Brawls and one, but we like to play video games. We like to play baseball.
Did you guys ever do any, like when you were younger, you ever do Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of stuff at all?
Yeah. So Baldur's Gate is obviously way too mature for
I haven't played it yet. I'm so excited for that.
So they've seen a couple scenes in it, but like then it'll get to the point where it's like, oh, see, like his tail His tail just hit me.
He's so happy.
There he is. He's crazy. He's chasing this cat around. He's having an amazing time. No, but like I got them for Christmas. I got them some dice, like a bag of, they got some 20 sides, some like the Caltrop ones that look like a triangle that if you ever step on that, you'll kill yourself. And the Young Dungeon Master's Guide. Because I thought it was true, even if they don't like decide to do it, it has a lot of cool pictures of like the Monsters Compendium.
Yes.
It just has a lot of cool pictures they can draw.
I want to get a freight version of D&D. Like get a group of folks together and do some dice roll some initiative, maybe some spot checks, have a good time. Well, we are at time, Dooner, but before we let you go, where can people find more about you? And I'll make sure to put all those in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Timothy Dooner. That's DOONER. My Twitter is at Timothy Dooner. So just the full name. What the Truck you can find on FreightWaves. It's also on FreightWaves YouTube. Or if you want the podcast version on Spotify, you get both video and audio. So that's a good source to go to. Look up What the Truck or Apple Podcasts. If you still use that one, full on audio, me blasting in your eardrums.
There you go. Well, I appreciate you so much, sir. If you can stick around for me, I'm going to kick you off, say some goodbyes. And if you're still there, I'll still love to talk to you. Thank you for coming on. Well, folks, there we have it. 50 times we've recorded, 50 times they've gone to the microphone. And I got to say, I cannot thank you enough. They said it couldn't be done, but look at us. It's Friday. You can't take that away. I am so blessed to have so many incredible creators and leaders in our industry who stop by Fleeting Conversations to have a quick call, have a nice discussion. If you're not following Timothy Dooner, you got to do that. FreightWaves is one of the best sources of news in this industry. And this industry is dynamic. It is changing, and you ought to be on top of things. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting it. If you find this interesting, useful, or entertaining, please like, subscribe, click the button, whatever the machine tells you to do. I appreciate it. And then I hit the button that makes it all go away. So as always, have a great day. Take care. And then I press the button and it's